Good evening, everyone. Good evening. Good evening. We have not officially started. Just so you know, this will be live streamed and it will be taped for later viewing. So look your best, and if you're here with someone you shouldn't be, this is your chance to go. All right. I was told to riff a little bit till we get, I don't know if the mic's, I don't think it's, but I'll just use my outdoor voice. I was told to riff a little until all the technology is ready. I understand that we have students here. Please raise your hands. Shout out your schools. Shout out your schools. Thank you for coming. What school? What school? Jackson, right? Yeah. And Jackson. Well, however you got here, we appreciate it. And just for our own curiosity here at the League of Women Voters, how many of you came to this facility last year for the constitutional forum? How many of you repeats? Because you liked it last year, hopefully? All right. How many are new tonight? Oh, this is awesome. Thank you. Thank you, thank you, thank you for coming. We really appreciate it. Until I get the high sign, are you ready? Ready? All right, thank you. Thank you. We have some wonderful folks taping and live streaming, and I got to give a shout out to all the wonderful League of Women Voters personnel who all work for free, making us much more informed. They raise our IQs just by existing. They put out the League of Women Voters material that many of you come to rely on before you make your decisions to vote. And one of the things we're most proud of is sponsoring forums like these. So really excited that so many conscientious, caring people are here. But I got to mention something, or I would be remiss. This is March. This is the last night of March, in addition to other kinds of madness, some of which we won't talk about, some of which are sports related. This is Women's History Month, and I have a couple of questions just before we get rolling. You, sir, in the blue, light blue tie, we barely know each other, right? I have a question for you, and there's no pressure. I mean, if you get it wrong, a security guard will escort you out, but I have a question. And that is, in what year did women get the right to vote federally and nationally and statewide?
I believe it was the last year of Wilson's administration, 1920.
You, sir, are correct. All right. Oh, you can't hear? The answer was 1920. And the gentleman was so educated that he said it was the last year of Wilson's term, 1920. Can you hear me okay? Okay. There's one more person I want to call out in the back. Yes, you, ma'am, you, with the badge. We barely know each other, right? Which amendment and in what year was it passed that gave women the right to vote?
It was the 19th Amendment, and you're stumping me. It was 1920, I believe.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes. Thank you. Thank you so much. You are correct, ma'am. So I also want to extend a warm and congenial welcome to you on behalf of the person who would usually extend the warm and congenial welcome to you, Co-President Diane D. Antonio, one of the wonderful people that makes these things happen and go so smoothly. Unfortunately, something occurred that prevented her from being here, and her co-president, Chris Clevenger, who would have also welcomed you congenially in her stead, also had something unexpected happen and could not be here tonight as well. So on behalf of our co-presidents, Diane D. Antonio and Chris Clevenger, and many of the officers who are here, that this thing is the most wonderful, smooth-running machine, the League of Women Voters. We're going to talk more about it later. But I just want to let you know, all of the folks who greeted you, all of the folks who are here helping, while we're talking with this esteemed panel tonight, you have at your seat a number of great things. You have a program, you have an evaluation, you have an index card. If some questions occur to you as you go through the evening and hear our knowledge, please write it down. Someone will be around to collect them later, and then we will answer them in a quick Q&A session. Here's how it's going to work. I'm kicking it off. Then we're going to have a panel of 3 experts. 2 of them run the Board of Elections, the Stark County Board of Elections, the director and deputy director, and I'll introduce them shortly. And my good friend, Dean Emeritus Law School Professor Dean Carro from the Akron Law School is here to talk about constitutional aspects after our guests from the Board of Elections talk about voting procedures, how they have been going, history, how they may be going. So anyway, as you know, voter rights are now in the news every day. And we need to sort facts from misinformation and disinformation. And that's one of our goals tonight. That's one of the goals of the League of Women Voters, to keep you informed. As you know, the League of Women Voters is a nonprofit, nonpartisan organization. We don't take sides on candidates. We have candidate forums. We can take side on issues to be determined by the national, state, and local levels, and we have on occasion. We have an agenda, we have timers. You'll hear from each of our panelists for roughly 15 minutes. That'll take up about an hour with our other remarks, and for the last half hour, from 7:30 to 8, we will take your questions and answers. Now, the reason we're asking you to put them down in writing is to scan them and make sure we're not being redundant or something that might have already come up. A couple of housekeeping rules here. We've not pre-screened what our voters will cover today, our speakers. They understand what the League stands for. They're free to offer their own opinions because we honor the United States Constitution and the First Amendment. Please don't take any photos or videos while we're being taped. And please remember to silence your cell phones if they are on audible. Please, thank you. We have some wonderful folks taping. And again, please remember to write your questions. If you haven't had a chance to look at your programs, please do. There's some wonderful information here. I will call your attention again to it at the end of the evening. You can read about me. I'm your moderator this evening, Joe Martuccio. I've been around a while. I was one of those people who got to vote at the age of 18 the first time around, back in '71. So you can read about me. I've been a politician, I've been a steel worker, I've been a public defender, I've been a number of things. But I would like to get to our panel. And with that, our first up, if you want to, you can read along in your program with me. If not, I'd be happy to read it out loud, because these folks have such wonderful bios. First up, to my immediate right, Susan Verble, the director of the Stark County Board of Elections. During her 30-year career in public service, Susan Verble has held various community outreach and leadership positions in the offices of the Ohio Senate, Ohio Attorney General, Ohio Auditor of State, and Ohio Lieutenant Governor. In 2016, Susan continued her career at the Stark County Board of Elections and was appointed director in 2025. She received her undergrad degree from Ohio State, and in 2017, she earned her MBA from Walsh University. Thank you for being here, Ms. Verble.
Okay, let's see if my clicker works. Is it hold and find out if my microphone's going to be on. Okay. Now, can you hear me, or do I need to do something magical? You can't hear me. Bad sign when people are giving me the thumbs down, or okay, that's a lot better. Okay. So I wanted to start off by saying I see so many familiar faces in our audience tonight. There's people who are full-time staff, people who are part-time staff, and people who are poll workers. So if you have anything to do with the Board of Elections in one of those capacities, raise your hand, please.
Wow, yes.
Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, everybody. So I wanted to give an overview of the Board of Elections. Some of it might seem elementary, but I have a feeling you're going to walk away learning a few things tonight. So that's my goal. So some quick facts about the Board of Elections. So we're the 8th largest board in Ohio. We have 103 polling locations. This facility is actually a polling location for us. We have 274 precincts across the county. Now in yellow, that's the number of registered voters we have, 243,000. So you can see roughly 11% are affiliated with the Democrat Party, 22% with the Republican Party, but 2/3 of our registered voters are not affiliated with either party. We call them nonpartisans. So at the Board of Elections, we're responsible for the fair, orderly, and efficient administration of elections in Stark County. We follow the Secretary of State's directives, which are derived from federal and state election laws, and we are bipartisan. So we are governed by 4 board members, 2 Democrats, 2 Republicans. Our director, which is me, I'm a Republican. I'm the opposite party of our chairman of the board. We have 18 full-time employees at our office. Again, half are Republican, half are Democrat. And I just want to put a shout out to our deputy director. We run the office together. She's not a subordinate of mine. We run the office together. So I just want to set that clear from the beginning. So recent voter turnout, I want to talk about the comparison between voter turnout last November and the presidential in 2024. So last year we had about 30%, which is a really good turnout in an odd year. But if you go backwards one year to the presidential, we had 73% turnout. So obviously people think it's really important to come out and vote for president, and yes, of course it is. But I would like to say that every election is important, because in those odd years, that's when you're voting for your community leaders that are making decisions about getting your roads paved, funding your fire and police, or making decisions about running your schools. So I wanted to point that out, that in those odd years, it's so important to get out and vote. The second thing I wanted to point out is there's 3 ways to vote every election, whether it's a big election like a presidential or a smaller odd year election. You can come to the Board of Elections 4 weeks before Election Day and vote at our office. You can request an absentee ballot and we'll mail that to you, or you can go to your polling location on Election Day. Now, it seems like recently the trend is moving away from the absentee. More people are coming to the office and voting early during those 4 weeks, but a lot of people are now choosing to go to their polling locations on Election Day. So the last thing I want to point out about this slide is the number in yellow. 105,000 voters came to our polling locations on the November general election for president. 105,000 people in one day. Can you think of any other county office that serves 105,000 people in one day? I can't. So obviously it's a big operation. It takes a lot of planning, a lot of training, and yes, we work more than 2 days a year. So what's on your ballot coming up in May? So it's a primary special election. So the candidates will be statewide offices, 2 Supreme Court races, 1 U.S. Senator, the state legislature, so 1 senator and 1 representative for your district, 1 Court of Appeals judge, 4 common pleas judges, 1 county commissioner, county auditor, state central committee for the political parties, whether it's going to be Democrat, Republican, or Libertarian, and then the Democrat state Stark County Central Committee for the Democrat Party. So what's the purpose of a primary? It's to elect your party's candidates to run in the November general election. So I put up there, ballot choice equals party affiliation. So when you go vote, you pick your ballot style. We don't tell you what you're going to pick. You tell us what you're going to pick. And so you can choose Democratic, Republican, Libertarian, or issues only. But just remember, that choice determines your party affiliation. So me as a Republican, let's say I have a Democrat who's running for judge in the primary, and I want to vote for that person. Well, that's going to change my party affiliation. You know, no big deal, but I want people to be aware that that happens. Or if you're a Democrat and your friend's running for county auditor and you want to vote for that person, that's going to switch your party affiliation. You have the right to do that, but people don't realize it changes your party affiliation when you do that. So issues. So we also call it a special election because we have tax issues on the ballot. So there's no statewide issues this election, but I'm sure for November we'll have several. There's 1 countywide issue for SARTA, and then there's 14 other tax issues and some local liquor options in specific precincts. So what are we doing right now at the Board of Elections? Well, we're processing absentee ballot applications. The close of voter registration is next Monday. So that means you have to get registered to vote by that deadline or change your address. But don't fret, if you don't change your address by that deadline, you can still vote a provisional ballot on Election Day if you're registered to vote. So first day of early voting is April 7th, and we'll be there for 4 weeks. for voters to come to our office. We're hiring and training poll workers as we speak. We have training going on right now at our office. We're testing all of our voting machines, and we are getting ready to send bipartisan teams out to the nursing homes beginning next week. So we assist voters at those facilities, and there's 57 of them across the county. So let's talk about being a poll worker. Obviously, we have all those voters showing up on election day, so we need people to serve those voters. Being a poll worker is a great way to serve your community and make money. We need about 1,000 poll workers every election, whether it's a small election or a big election. So you as a poll worker, you can decide to keep the money that you earn, or you can donate it to a charity, a cause that you feel passionate about. So when you're a poll worker, you earn $169. That includes your training. And if you're an attorney, a CPA, a realtor, or a social worker, you can earn continuing education requirements. So what's required to be a poll worker? You have to attend a 3-hour training. You have to work on election day. And yes, those hours are long, and that's where I start to lose people. It's like you had me at you have to be there at 5:30 a.m. And yes, it's a long day, but it goes by fast. And again, it's just a great way for public service and to give back to your community. So our poll workers work 5:30 in the morning until about 8:30 at night. So the polls close at 7:30, and then you have to close down the polling location. Anyone who's registered and to vote in Stark County can be a poll worker unless you're a convicted felon. Okay, so what are the duties for a poll worker? So you work as a team to set up and close the polling location. You process voters at the check-in table. You provide assistance at the voting machines and throughout the location. And many of the duties that poll workers perform are in bipartisan teams. So what are our needs as an office when we talk about poll workers? We want good people who want to serve. We want people with the mindset that every detail, every ballot, every person matters. We want poll workers who will get some good experience and then decide to become a leader at that location, step up the lead. It's more responsibility, but we need good leaders to run these locations. And the one thing we don't want is people talking about politics or hot button issues on election day at our polling locations. That's a big no-no. So to become a poll worker, which I know some of you already are, but if you are interested or you know somebody who's interested, you can go to our website and sign up. We'll have you complete some paperwork. We'll assign you a location. We try to get you as close to home as possible, and we'll schedule you a training. Okay, so I'm going to talk about election security right now. So our top priority is the safety of our employees, our poll workers, and of course voters, and the security of our voting equipment and ballots. So the Secretary of State likes to say in Ohio it's easy to vote and hard to cheat, and that Ohio is the gold standard for election administration in the United States. And we went to a conference last summer, and one of the opening videos had this quote from the Secretary of State's office, and I really like this quote. I think it's powerful. We deliver not just results, but something far more important, trust. So on election security, when you go to vote on election day, you have to present an unexpired photo ID. It can be a driver's license, state ID, passport, military or veterans ID. We check that voter to make sure the picture on the ID matches the person that's in front of us. We also check the license to make sure that the person is not a non-citizen, which means that they are a citizen. Okay. So election security when it comes to voter rolls. So this is another quote from the Secretary of State. Accurate voter rolls are the backbone of secure elections. So we regularly check our voter rolls to remove inactive and ineligible voters. So we get death lists. We get a list of people who are going away to prison, and we remove those voters. We send out letters if there's been no voter-initiated activity, or if the post office thinks you've moved, we get a list. So actually, just a couple weeks ago, we sent out over 16,000 letters to people who the post office thinks you might have moved, or if you haven't had any voter-initiated activity. So we want you to confirm your address, or if you changed your address, we want to update your address. Okay, so we have accurate voter rolls. It's our ongoing responsibility to check voter rolls to ensure data accuracy. So we work with other counties to resolve duplicate records because you never want somebody to be registered to vote in 2 different counties at the same time. And we also send letters to folks who their data in our voter registration system does not match the BMV. And then for new voter registrations, these are people who are newly registered to vote. The Secretary of State checks several systems to verify their citizenship. Okay, absentee voting. Absentee ballots are only mailed to people who complete an application. Ohio's laws are different than other states. We do not just randomly send absentee ballots to all voters, okay? So we have a 2-step verification process to carefully check the name, address, ID, and signature that matches our records. So we do that on the application and on the ballot envelope when it comes back to us. We count the absentee ballots even if the race isn't close. And in our absentee room, we call it the bunker because it doesn't have any windows. But to get into that room, it's bipartisan locks, and I can never be in that room by myself. I always have to have a member of the opposite party with me. So even as director, I can't be there by myself. A bipartisan team has to be in that room. Okay, voting machines. So every election we test our 1,400 voting machines to make sure they're working properly. Our machines are stored on site at our office. Again, they're dual lock and key, surveillance camera, and you have to have a key card to get into that room. All of our voting systems are certified, and no voting machine can ever be connected to the internet. In fact, they don't even have the ability to connect to the internet. The last part of our testing is we place tamper-proof locks and seals on our voting machines, and we instruct our poll workers. Election day, when you're setting up, if one of those seals or locks are missing or tampered with, do not use that voting machine. Let us know. Finally, post-election audits. Every election, we conduct a post-election audit. We hand count 5% of the results for 3 races from certain locations that are randomly picked. So last November, we did 12 locations, and we had a 100% accuracy rate on our audit. So how can you help? You can become a part-time worker and help us in the areas of testing our machines, processing absentee ballots, early voting, be a part of a nursing home, or working in our front office. And you can help us dispel rumors. When you hear something kind of that doesn't sound right, no, we do not send absentee ballots to every voter. No, the voting machines are never connected to the internet. Our voting machines are secure and tested before every election, and we conduct hand-counted audits to ensure our election results are accurate. Okay, and you can follow us on social media too. We would appreciate that. So if anybody wants to be a poll worker, please go to our website and sign up. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Director Verble. That was an excellent, informative presentation. We will all be available for questions at the conclusion of the forum this evening. So if you have any for the director, the deputy director, or our professor, please write them down and hold them till later. I wanted to mention something. And how many of you in the room are attorneys or have a law degree? That's great. I know we're going to be talking about that a little later. One of the attorneys who was coming tonight called me, or texted me and said, did you see Sharita Gachet's column in the repository this past weekend? We have a very gifted writer at the Canton Repository in the form of Sharita Gachet. Outstanding. Anyway, in her column, she cites some of the statistics that Director Verble cited from the Secretary of State. In 2022, the Secretary of State's office released post-election statistics showing possible voter fraud only in 0.0.0.05. Okay? It is an infinitesimally small fraction. Audits of all 88 counties who do their job so well in Ohio respectively had correction rates of 99.88% and 99.9% accuracy in the 20 and 22 elections. That's something to be proud of. Now, Not going to comment much on it, but you can read the rest of the article if you like about some other subjects that might come up this evening, like the voter reforms at the federal and state level that are being proposed, and the shipment of some of our records to the feds from states. At any rate, thank you again, Director Verble. If you want to comment on that, you may. If the Deputy Director wants to comment on that, she may as well. Let me introduce our next panelist, please, with your permission. Regina Johnson is the Deputy Director of the Stark County Board of Elections. She has served as the Deputy Director of the Stark County Board of Elections since 2019. She started as a poll worker in 2008 and has continued in the elections field. Regina has a master's degree and doctorate from Harvard University. She taught at Harvard, the University of Kansas, the Stanford Kyoto Center for the Japanese Studies, and the Kyoto International Research Center for Japanese Studies. She's also the co-author of Greeks of Stark County. Now, tell me if I get this right. I wrote it down to see if I could try to get it right. Konbanwa.
Ah, it's correct. Konbanwa.
Does that mean good evening?
Good evening. It does indeed.
Thank you. Deputy Director Johnson, please.
Well, it's a pleasure to see so many familiar faces here, actually. It's not surprising that people who are interested in elections are coming out and helping us. So shout out to all of you who have gone through your poll worker training or are about to come in for some kind of training to work for us part-time. We really appreciate it. Okay, so I have the job of presenting some practical solutions to some of the problems that confront us with voting. So we're going to get a little bit into the weeds, and many of these practical solutions may not apply to you because you're a sophisticated audience. You probably all know that you need a photo ID when you go to the polls. You probably all have your photo IDs ready, but you probably have family and friends who might not have what they need or could use some information about this. So we're going to be talking about some of the changes and then some of the groups that might be adversely affected by some of these changes. So we are 35 days away from the primary election. Voting starts in 7 days. We're very excited. And as Joe Martuccio said, election laws are being discussed everywhere right now. It is the political football of the moment. So in the field of elections, it's not necessarily a good thing to be the current exciting topic, but the thing to remember is that the Save America Act is not the law yet. It may not become the law. It may change along the way. Don't get distracted from that, by that. Okay. The election laws that are problematic in California and Texas don't affect us here. So we're going to be looking at the Ohio laws that might affect you and the people that you are close to, your friends and your family. So many of the changes that have been put in place in election law in the last couple of years have been there to incrementally upgrade the current standards of security. And in many cases, that's been a good thing. In some cases, there have been some unintended consequences, and in some cases, they have been a solution in search of a problem. So we have to be careful about what we are wishing for, and we have to be very careful about how we are going to vote under these changing circumstances. I had a discussion with somebody from the BCI a couple of years ago, and he was investigating voter fraud. And I said, what do you find in the field of voter fraud? When you go out and you check all of these things, you're investigating all the time, what do you find? And he said, mostly I find that people are confused. I find that people don't know exactly when they're supposed to vote, where they're supposed to vote. They get confused by conflicting information, and they might do something that is wrong. He said very, very, very rarely does he find cases of actual fraud in voting. And that is very similar to what we find. One of the things we find is that people might vote early in early voting, and then they'll vote at the polls because they forgot. Okay, is this person fraudulently trying to vote twice? Maybe not. Maybe they're just forgetful. But it's something that we have to be aware of, that often those statistics about voter fraud are inflated. Okay, so we don't see a whole lot of it here. Doesn't mean that we don't have to be careful. But Okay. But one of the things that we should remember, and that probably all of you know, that is since 2023, it's been necessary to have a photo ID at the polls, if you come in to vote early or if you go to the polls. The other thing that changed at that time was that if you are bringing in a voted absentee ballot for somebody else, that you have to sign a form indicating who the person is and what your relationship to that person is. Now, 11 days ago, the law changed again. So the law changed in a couple of ways, some of them which are very easy to understand and some of them which are not. One of the ones that's easy is your voted absentee ballot has to get there on election night by 7:30. No more grace period, okay? So for those of you who vote absentee by mail, this is something to be aware of. You might want to track your ballot on our website because there were a number of ballots in previous elections that were valid at the time because they were postmarked on time and they arrived within the grace period. There is no more grace period for most voters. The other thing, and this is a little bit complicated, is that if your data in the system has got a mismatch with the BMV or with the Social Security Administration, and you are flagged as having that mismatch, you can't vote absentee, except for a few small exceptions. You have to vote in person, you have to vote provisionally, and if you do not correct that problem and show a photo ID when you vote provisionally, your vote won't count and your registration will be canceled. So this is a big step up in the system in terms of trying to make sure that all of the data is correct. And this is something that people are probably not aware of now. Okay, so do you know, for example, most of you probably know somebody whose address has changed, somebody whose name has changed, okay? Have them update their registration by Monday, okay? Do you know somebody who votes absentee and their signature style has changed? Well, if you wrote at one time Jane Doe on the left, and you now write Jane Doe on the right, then because we check signatures, that's not going to count. So there are forms so that you can update your signature, but be aware that if you are expressing your personality by signing your name in a very interesting way, or if your hands become really arthritic and you're having a hard time, that our signature checks will send that back to you, and you'll have even less time to get the response back to us so that we can send you the ballot so you can send us the ballot, okay? And get it there by election night. So it's better for us, it's better for you if you get things updated by April 6th. Now, for a name change, you can come to the board, you can update in person, but you can also take, for example, a marriage certificate, a divorce document. You can take them to the polls, and that you can use them then. So if you do not get your information updated by the 6th, you can also take these documents to the polls. You can also update your signature when you go to the polls. However, if you have an expired photo ID, please renew it before you go to the polls. And everybody, please make sure you take your ID with you. I think our battery is declining. Okay. Okay, one of the things that happened in 2023 is the list of people who were allowed to bring in your ballot was set. One of the things it is, your spouse can do it, close family members can do it. A grandparent can bring in a grandchild's ballot. A grandchild cannot bring in a grandparent's ballot. A mother-in-law or father-in-law can bring in a daughter-in-law or son-in-law's ballot. A daughter-in-law or son-in-law cannot bring in their mother-in-law and father-in-law's ballot. People have asked me, one grandson said, my grandmother doesn't get around. How is it that she can bring in mine and I can't bring in hers? And the response was, well, perhaps not all of the legislators who voted on this read it very carefully, or perhaps they're a little bit out of touch with some of the conditions that people live with. Next. No, somebody?
Technical issue.
Okay, well, we'll just go ahead anyway. However, if there is a disabled voter, that disabled voter can ask anyone except an employer or a union representative to take in their ballot. So if you have a family member who is disabled, who has those kinds of problems, you can do that for them. However, you can't just drop it in the drop box. You have to sign a form. Next slide, please. You have to sign a form. So that means you have to come into our counter, and you sign the top if you're a family member, and you sign the bottom if it's for a disabled voter. Next slide, please. Okay, I got it. Okay, so when Senate Bill 293 was passed in December 2025, it was definitely set so that we would have these changes in place for the midterms. So as I said, absentee ballots must be received by 7:30 p.m. on Election Day. However, there is a grace period for people in the military and for overseas citizens. Now, who would be affected by this particular change? Actually, in the November 2024 election, there were 296 ballots of the 33,000 that were timely postmarked, received during the grace period, and counted. So these ballots would not be eligible. So that is not a huge number, but if you were one of those people who was voting one of those 296 ballots, this would matter to you. Now, here's where it gets a little bit sticky. Do you know anyone who has sloppy handwriting? Do you know somebody who occasionally writes down their driver's license wrong because they're flipping digits, or might forget their social security number? That means that if you ever filled out forms for some agency and you flip those digits, there might be data that's wrong about you in their records. So if you have a data mismatch, then you will be required to correct that mismatched information. Now, you may think that that is not such a big deal. However, so we have sent out to a number of voters a letter which says, you have mismatching information. You need to correct this. Now, if you get something that has an official election mail logo on it, this is not junk mail. You really need to look at it because this could affect your voter registration. We need you to respond right away and let us know, either confirm or to correct the information. Now, the problem is, if you do not correct that mismatching information, what happens is that you have to vote a provisional ballot in person. That means if you always vote absentee, you can't, unless you are disabled, confined, in the military or abroad. Okay, so 1, you have to vote provisionally. 2, you have to vote the provisional ballot, and you will need your current photo ID and the information to correct the mismatch. If you don't have that, then you have a 4-day grace period to take it to the Board of Elections. And if you don't cure your ballot within those 4 days, your ballot will not count and your registration will be canceled. So this is the first time that this particular and your registration will be canceled clause has been set in there. And I think that people are usually not aware of this. So most of you have got photo IDs, right? So who might be the people who would be affected by this? Well, people who vote absentee, they don't have to show a photo ID. People who are not veterans, people who don't travel, and people who have not gotten a state ID. So in Stark County, as Director Verble said, there are 57 nursing homes that we send voting teams to, bipartisan teams, and we have a number of those team members here. They do a wonderful job. They are very dedicated. We have about 1,000 voters out there, and many of these voters do not have valid photo ID. So if you know somebody who's in a nursing home and they don't have valid photo ID, they can have a free state ID issued. There may be processing fees. You can request a homebound ID packet by calling this number. But practically speaking, the BMV does not always have enough staff to send out to your particular homebound location to take a photo of you. And practically speaking, it takes a long time to get together the documents that you need. I know that when I went to the BMV, And I had this list of documents that I was supposed to be bringing with me to establish all the categories to get my ID. It took me 3 trips and 1 trip to the Social Security office in order to get it straight. And I pride myself on being able to read documents. It's not an easy task. So how do you establish residency if all of the utilities are in your parents' names, or in your spouse's name, or you don't have a credit card, or you have just moved into a nursing home? And the answer is, there's a proof of Ohio residency certified statement that your spouse, your parent, or a social services agency like a nursing home can fill out for you. But there's another category of people that are affected, and those are the recently naturalized citizens. If you go to a polling location with non-citizen on your license, but you've actually recently become naturalized, you will have to present your citizenship papers and sign an affidavit for your ballot to count. Now, a naturalized citizen is an American citizen, and of course they are eligible to vote, but they can be challenged at the polls. They will have to present proof of citizenship and sign an affidavit. Without that, they would need to vote provisionally, and if they did not have the necessary documentation, they would have to take it to the Board of Elections within 4 days. So it is something that I think that we should all remember, that it is no small burden for people who are new American citizens to have to carry with them their documents in order, citizenship documents, in order to prove again and again that they are eligible to vote. So, tell your friends and family to update all of their documents, and if you have a question, give us a call.
Thank you. Arigato. Arigato. Thank you. We are so grateful that the Deputy Director and the Director came this evening on their free time to share so much current and historical information with us. It's incredible that they're so highly diligent, educated, and professional. I'm glad they're at the helm, personally. Thank you. I'm going to read this next bio for our third panelist. I want to give a shout out to our friends from the NAACP who are here, who are going to be helping us out with some voting reform, some voting efforts yet to come, educational efforts. Next up, J. Dean Carro, Director of the Appellate Review Office in the Legal Clinic at the University of Akron. J. Dean Carro is a Professor of Law Emeritus, 2013, the University of Akron School of Law. Currently, he's a director of the Appellate Review Office and the Legal Clinic at the University of Akron. That's a past tense. He argued cases in various appellate courts. Research includes prisoner civil rights actions, post-conviction state and federal, criminal and appellate, state and federal law. He earned his BA from the State University of New York, SUNY, at New Paltz, and his law degree from the University of Akron. I just got to get a plug in here. I am one of the few lawyers working in Stark County that did not get his law degree from the University of Akron, but I heard wonderful things about a particular professor there from all of my colleagues in all the offices I worked. And at first they said they were quaking in their boots because this guy scared them a bit. But they all ended up loving him and respecting him gratefully, and I think you'll see why. Thank you, Professor Carro.
Welcome. Is this good here? So the first two people knew what they were talking about. May I have the first slide, please? Where's my lady? First slide, please. Okay. Yeah, that one. I can't do that and speak at the same time. So most of the stuff we're going to talk about is not on there. Why did I do that? Take a guess. So you would have to participate. That's the whole idea, okay? So when we think about the Constitution, we have to think about the predicate, the things that happened before. Why did we have a Constitution? We had Articles of Confederation during the Revolutionary War. They didn't work out. We'll talk about that. But what happened in the 40 or so years before we had the Constitution? What happened to us as a country, as a colony? What happened? What were we involved in? What war? What? Before the revolution. Who said French and Indian? French and Indian War. Now, the French and Indian War was actually a world war. Britain was engaged in a world war, and you know how expensive world wars are? Very expensive. So we're a colony. The English are protecting us in our so-called French and Indian War. And what happens to Britain is they accumulate what? Debt. So when a government accumulates debt, they say to the people who pay taxes, you are going to do what? Pay more taxes, okay? Now the colonists were very resistant people as manifested by the Revolutionary War. So there was a phrase they used. What was that phrase when they were taxed with the stamp? Oh, wait, I didn't call on you yet. The Stamp Act, the Tax Act, the Tea Act, the Townsend Acts. And what did they say in response to that? Very good. So you read your materials. So no taxation without representation. Are you taxed today as American citizens? Are you taxed? State, local, federal? Well, why are you not objecting? Because you have representation. That's the theory. That's the theory of representation. So we didn't like the idea that we were being taxed and we didn't have any say in the process, right? So we do this thing called the Declaration of Independence. And after that, we do the Constitution. But why did we reject the Articles of Confederation? Now, these are not the ones we saw in 1860. These are different. The Articles of Confederation were in effect during the Revolutionary War. What was the problems? Anybody know the problems with it? Yes. Are you a student? You look young.
They didn't get an appropriate tax.
There's no taxation power. There's no central government. There's one house selected by each state, and there's no judiciary. How do you run a government that way? And so we realized pretty early on, by virtue of a number of rebellions, the big one was called Shays' Rebellion. Anybody remember Shay? Anybody alive back then? No. So Shay comes back from the war, hadn't been paid. He comes back to Massachusetts, and all of a sudden there's these tax bills. So he leads basically an army. Well, the states couldn't handle it, which triggered the idea that we needed to change the Articles of Confederation, hence the Constitutional Convention. Now, I'm going to ask Mr. Martuccio a question. Sir. You have people who signed both the Declaration and the United States Constitution. What percentage of those people were lawyers?
I'm going to say around 50%.
Around 50% is exactly right. Now, why? I'm not flaunting my education, but back then, think about it. Who were the most educated people in the community? Lawyers, right? They went to college, they did an apprenticeship, so they knew about the law. More importantly, what did they know? They knew the history. They knew the history of the world. They knew the history of their own country. They knew the history of Britain. So what did they know? They knew that consolidated power was good or bad? Bad. Why? What does power do to people? Power corrupts. Absolute power corrupts? Absolutely. So they understood that. So when we look at this issue, the issue of which branch has the authority or which entity has the authority to change state laws. So number one, we look at the United States Constitution. First three articles. Article 1 deals with the legislative branch, which is two houses. Which are they? House of Reps, Senate, right? So do I have my next? Oh, you got, no, that's good. You're good. Go back to that one. All right, so why do we have these different ages? Why do we have those different ages for the different houses? Think about a 25-year-old today. What would you think about a 25-year-old today? Back then, you were halfway through your life. You're 30. How about 35 for president? So we got to put that in context. So that's the starting point. We want to have people who have experience. Article 1 deals with the legislative branch. Article 2 deals with the executive branch. Article 3 deals with Judiciary, right? So when we're looking at this issue, we're thinking about Article 1. Article 1, Section 4. Do I have that up there? No. Okay, so Article 1, Section 4. Article 1 deals with what branch? Congress. You know this stuff. Come on, give me that. The times, places, and manner of holding elections for senators and representatives shall be prescribed in each state by the legislature thereof. Why? Why do we want the states setting the rules? Because that's where the people are. Makes sense, doesn't it? But the Congress may at any time by law make or alter such regulations except as to the places of choosing senators. So we have a president right now who issued an executive order in March of 2025. Why do we now have the SAVE Act pending in Congress? What did I just read to you? Does the president have the authority? No. So somebody in his Oval Office or some member of Congress came and said, by the way, I'm sorry to tell you it's bad news, but you don't have the authority. What do you mean? I'm the president of the United States. Okay, number one, you don't have unlimited authority. So only the Congress can do it. That's why he's pushing the SAVE Act, okay? So what does the SAVE Act do? Does anything bother you about the SAVE Act? Which one of you here tonight has a certified copy of your birth certificate? You carrying it with you? Well, then I'm sorry, you can't vote. You don't have it with you? This act requires that you have a certified copy of your birth certificate. Really? Really? There's going to be limitations on mail-in voting. Why? The person who created this in the original by executive order, why is this person concerned about fraudulent voting? What's his theory about 2020? It was stolen. It was stolen. Every court that's ever looked at it has said no, but that's his theory. So the SAVE Act is designed to prevent that. Okay? Article 2, we're talking about the executive branch. Next one, please. That's the stuff we just talked about. Next one, please. Oh, the last one on that. That's critical. One of the speakers mentioned who gets to review this stuff. Who do you want reviewing your personal material? Do you trust these people? Yeah, hell, they seem like regular people. I'll trust them. Or do you want someone in Washington, D.C.? Have you looked at the Attorney General of the United States? You want the Department of Justice doing that? Do you want Homeland Security doing that? Who's the head of Homeland Security now? We're not sure. So the whole idea is we don't like any of these regulations. Next. Okay. Lawyers do a lot of good things. They do some bad things. My wife was a domestic relations lawyer. Her clients liked her, but the other side hated her. And so she doesn't do that any longer because it is very difficult. But lawyers in this setting have a hard hurdle to overcome, and that is the United States Supreme Court decided a case that said if you want to have a class action, meaning that it covers the entire country, you have to have a representative from each state to contest whatever it is you're contesting. So how hard is it to create a class action trying to locate 50 people who want to put their name on a complaint? How hard is that? I think it's real hard. I think this is designed basically to make it much more difficult to do class actions. Now there have been some courts which have delayed it. So now what we're facing is the proper method is for Congress to do this. Next slide. There's a very important case. I didn't put the name of the case. Anybody know the name of the case? Lawyers? Youngstown Sheet and Tube versus Sawyer. Anybody remember the Korean War? Okay. So we're fighting this war with the UN behind us, and we send troops into the Korean Peninsula. During that war, the steel mills go on strike. And you're a guy named Harry S. Truman. The S stands for nothing. You're Harry S. Truman, and you see the steel mills, and what do you need in a war? Steel. What do you use steel for? Everything. Tanks, bullets, everything, ships, planes, everything. So what does Harry Truman do? The buck stops here, he says. I'm going to seize them. I'm going to order the Commerce Secretary to seize them. Why is this case important? The Supreme Court says, Mr. President, you don't have the authority to do that. You don't have the authority to seize the steel mills. That's why this case is important. And that's still good precedent. Next one. Thank you. Any questions on what we're talking about? Any things I said that were confusing? Nothing? Nothing. I'm done.
Outstanding. That, ladies and gentlemen, thank you, Professor Carro, is a fine example of the Socratic method, eliciting answers. Thank you. At this point, we'll spend the balance of our forum sorting through your questions and answers and asking whichever panel member, whoever is willing to or relevant in that particular thing. I wanted to ask one more question of the audience, though, actually two. How many of you are public officials or served as a public official? Thank you. How many of you are currently candidates? We have at least one here. Thank you for being here. It shows good taste. The League of Women Voters is a preeminent supplier of information for elections.
May I read something?
Sure, please. You didn't use all your time, so go ahead.
I didn't?
No.
No.
You had another minute or two.
I want this young lady to stand before you to show you what's on her sweatshirt. I bought this for her. It says,
To wear tonight.
just to wear tonight. Democracy isn't a spectator sport. What do you think of that? Hoorah, baby. Yeah. That's exactly right. So you can't just sit there and say, well, you know, that speech was good, this one was good. You got to go out and do something. You got to go out and act. And that's the thing that separates the American society from all other past societies. Thank you for wearing my sweatshirt.
Oh, you're welcome.
Thank you. One more little thing as we're going through these questions, a little inside baseball. Most people who are right-handed put badges and stickers on their left lapel or the left side of their clothing, correct? Most people who are right, not everyone, most people. I am right-handed, and I typically used to do that, but in my political years, yes, my name is Joe, and I'm a recovering politician. In my political years, I was told by an old insider, you should put it on your left lapel, because we read from left to right. In our world, in our part of the planet, we read from left to right. So you want them to glance from left to right. Little inside baseball there. All right, these first couple are for the Board of Elections. First, what is the current turnaround time from applying for an absentee ballot to receiving one?
Well, nobody's receiving one right now because we can't start mailing them until April 7th. So anything that comes in now, we're processing them, and we send as many out as possible on the first day, and then within a few days, we are day-to-day.
Account for the mail, so we're not miracle workers. We put it in the mail, we drive them to the post office. But what happens when it gets to the post office, God knows.
And I think it's worth repeating. The last day to register is?
Monday,
And the first day to start early voting is?
Tuesday.
Thank you. Why do state officials keep talking about voter fraud knowing that audits show it is virtually non-existent? I think either the chair or the deputy. Unless you want to jump in, Professor.
I don't know. It's a good question. I think a lot of people question why legislators do certain things. I don't have an answer. I'm sorry.
I think it's exciting. I think people like to get involved in conspiracy theories, and it's exciting as an excuse for saying, I lost, but it wasn't me. You know, somebody stole it from me. It's not just the president who has said that. It's a lot of people who say that on both sides of the aisle. So I think that it's much more interesting than saying, well, actually, if I'd worked a little bit harder and if I had actually spoken to all the voters, I would have been elected, but that's not a very good story. So I think you could say 10 people came in and they stole the vote, and these people are doing this, and that's why I lost. It's more exciting.
Thank you. Professor, thank you.
There are some people in the world who have very fragile egos. And I would say to those people, don't go into politics because you're going to either win or you're going to lose. But there's one person in particular who has to have adoration at every step, has to have statues erected to him, preferably gold. And the idea is that he couldn't possibly have lost in a fair election. And so that's infected our Congress. It's infected our Congress to the point where they bought into it. The people around him are sycophants, and they support him in those views. It's unfortunate because it's really derailing our system. There is no voter fraud. Every lawsuit that's ever been raised, what, there's 60 of them or something to that effect?
60 out of 61, I believe.
Yeah. They've all been rejected by the courts. Remarkably, most of the lawyers who pursued those have been disbarred. That means if you've been disbarred, you can no longer be a lawyer. So you're willing to give up your license that you went to law school for 3 years, you took a bar exam, which is not easy. You gave up that license because you wanted to love or adore this particular person. Eastman is one example. That's my answer.
Thank you. Thank you. I got a riff here for another second. Some of you came to our immigration forum at St. Paul's, our good friends at St. Paul's in downtown Canton. I thought it was a very powerful forum, and I mentioned that I am a first-generation American. This week, birthright citizenship is being orally argued in front of the United States Supreme Court. Please keep an eye on it. You have all shown your conscientiousness by being here and that you care. Keep an eye on it. Whatever side of the issue you're on, keep an eye on it. If you can, follow, read, listen to the arguments. See what makes sense to you. Professor.
You go back to the 14th Amendment. That's my area, right? I get to talk about that. So why do we have the 14th Amendment? There was a very famous case called Dred Scott. And the justice who wrote the opinion, Chief Justice Taney, Taney, was a slaveholder. And he was on the Supreme Court. He was the chief. He wrote the opinion. And in this opinion, he was considering the case of Mr. Scott, who was a slave in Missouri, but was taken by his slave owner to Illinois and then Wisconsin territory. When he gets back to Missouri, Dred Scott sues for his freedom. The court below says, you can't sue in federal court because you're a slave. You're not an American citizen. So you have no right to go to federal court. A fellow in Ohio, a congressman from Cadiz, Ohio, named John Bingham. Anybody ever heard that name? Go to Cadiz, Ohio. There's a statue to him. He wrote the first section of the 14th Amendment, which says, if you're born in this country, you are an American citizen. A later case, in the 19th century, ARK, says, well, if you're a child of a family that is here on diplomatic purposes, you're not an American citizen. But everybody else, whether you're here illegally or not, if you're born in this country, you're an American citizen. That's the answer to the question. There is an effort right now to destroy that concept, to take away that birthright citizenship. And you were born in this country, right?
Yes, sir.
You're a birthright citizen. We want to get rid of him?
Some do. Just one more plea, and then we have some questions, practical questions for the Board of Elections. Please vote. I think all of you do. More importantly, one of the statistics that gets glossed over is many groups have been very successful in getting people to register to vote. They've had some success with that. But a lot of those folks didn't turn up to vote after they registered. That the key now is getting people to vote who ordinarily don't or only occasionally do. It matters. Every vote matters. I was talking with these wonderful women last week, and, some votes are decided by a coin toss every now and then. They're so close. Now, that's local, but if you recall, Vice President Gore lost his attempt at a presidency by one vote. Now, it happened to be in the Supreme Court, but it was one vote. It matters. Please inform yourselves. Get accurate information. Please, please, please vote. All right, speaking of voting, how does one find out where your polling place is? First question.
You can go to the Board of Elections website and go to Show Me My Ballot, which is at the top of the screen, and you enter your name and your birth date, and it'll pull up where you're registered to vote and your polling location. Or you can call our office.
Second question, thank you, Director. Are any schools still used as polling places?
We have a number of schools, City of Canton, City of Alliance mostly. I think that's really it. I know Canton is closing one of its schools that we use.
Thank you. Last question on this
Excuse me.
card.
Under the
sorry.
law, we
Thank you.
are
Thank you.
allowed to use as polling locations places that were built with tax dollars. But you can understand that many of the institutions are concerned about the safety of their people, so we try not to force that particular issue. However, people are always worried about changes in polling locations. We don't change polling locations just because we want to. It's because that particular place is either closing or doesn't find it appropriate any longer, or perhaps is thinking that it's not safe. So we are always having a problem with finding adequate polling locations, and the issue of schools is central to that.
Thank you. Thank you. And the last question on that card was, please explain again the provisional ballot.
You want to do it? Okay.
If there is something that is, if your address has changed, in some cases, if your name has changed, if in this case you have mismatching information and you need to update that, you vote a ballot. It's called a provisional ballot. It provides all of the information that we need. If you are a registered voter and the information is correct and we can verify it, that ballot counts.
So it's basically a paper ballot that's given to you on election day, and you fill out a special envelope with all of your information on it. Then you as the voter put that ballot into the envelope, and then we start looking at those when we begin to canvass, which is what, 14 days or about 10 days after the election is over. But if you're registered to vote and you have all the correct information on that envelope, your ballot will count.
However, when we check those particular envelopes, we can't check the ballot first to decide whether it's going to count or not. We have to decide, before we see what is inside the envelope, we have to decide whether that ballot's going to count or not. So there's no chicanery going on there.
And it's done by bipartisan teams.
That's so crucial. Thank you. Another practical question, and then one on more of a legal question. First, the practical. How do patients in a hospital setting vote?
We have teams. And so if you are hospitalized and it is not a planned hospitalization, if you are hospitalized after the deadline for absentee voting, call our office and we can send a bipartisan voting team to assist you. And the hospital can also help you. If it is before that deadline, call our office. The same teams that serve the nursing homes can come to the hospital.
Thank you. Was it legal for the Ohio Secretary of State to send voter registration data to the federal government?
I think the attorney should answer that.
It depends. Is there a provision in Ohio law that allows that? Otherwise, if there's
Not that I'm
not,
aware of.
then he's exceeded his authority.
I mean, I've heard that the argument, well, I mean, you get your social security number from the federal government, so don't they already have it anyways?
Well, but that goes back to the way the Constitution is constructed. The Constitution is constructed in such a way that there are enumerated powers. The only powers you have as the president or as a congressperson or in the judiciary is if it's enumerated, set forth specifically in the Constitution. And so there's an agency, a federal agency, that gathers material for specifically that purpose. So, I mean, for example, if the president wants to send money to a certain place or to serve a certain function, that money has to be allocated by Congress. Congress has the power of the purse. So the president doesn't have the authority to send money to a place or a person or an entity without the authority of Congress. In a similar way, unless the agency, the federal agency, is directing it and has the authority to direct it, it shouldn't go.
Thank you. Again, a reminder, I'm sure Diane would poke me, our co-president, and say, remind everyone that we are nonpartisan, but we are going to answer as factually and legally as we can. I think I know the answer to this one. If you vote issue only in the primary, can you vote Democratic or Republican in November? And I think I'm safe in saying yes.
Everybody gets the same ballot in November. So if you're a registered Republican and you want to vote for every Democrat on the ballot in November, nobody knows who you vote for. The only thing that they know is what kind of ballot style you pull in the primary. That's the only thing that people know.
Thank you, Director. Coming off of one of the earlier points, do naturalized citizens need to present their citizenship documents every time they vote or just the first time?
As long as the databases get updated and as long as it's not continually kicking them out.
Okay, thanks. Does the new law eliminating grace period for mail-in voting include any emergency provisions or allowances?
No.
Only for the UOCAVA, which is the military and overseas citizens. But that's all, right? Okay.
Thank you, yeah. I'm going to try to go for the shorter answers first because we have a really good question we're going to save for the last 5 minutes or so for all the panelists. What protections are in place to protect against voter intimidation in Stark County?
So I've actually talked to the sheriff about this just yesterday, and every election the Secretary of State sends out a law enforcement memo. But the Board of Elections is required under Ohio law to prevent violence and disorder, and we have the authority to call on the sheriff for aid. So just like any other election, he will respond if there's an issue to make sure no one is hindered in their right to vote.
Thank you. When political independents volunteer to work at the polls, who are they paired with when they are asked to address an issue? It's an interesting question.
Yeah.
Well, it's easier for us if we have people who have political affiliations because there are certain, to form a member of a bipartisan team, you have to have two parties, right? So if somebody is unaffiliated, we don't know if they are truly unaffiliated or if they're a Republican that doesn't vote in primaries or a Democrat that doesn't vote in primaries. So for many of the tasks that are at the polling locations, we need to have one Democrat and one Republican. So there are other roles, but they cannot do certain functions which are set aside for bipartisan teams.
Thank you. If a voting poll is located at a privately held property, I assume maybe like a church, can the owner set their own rules about signage on the property during the election?
So
Yeah.
yes, many of our polling locations request that no political signs be placed on their property. And we tell all of our candidates that because we do not want to jeopardize the relationship with our polling locations because they're so hard to find and keep.
But on election day, for example, if we are in a church and that church has a particular political point of view, they are not allowed to express their political point of view in their signs on election day.
Thank you. The size of the Board of Election staff seems small. 2 questions. Is that the case? Secondly, more importantly, how does the Stark County Board of Elections compare to other offices in Ohio? I assume that means other BOE offices.
Yes.
Yeah.
So our peer county is Butler County, north of Cincinnati, and we're smaller than them. They have more money than we do, but I think we do the best that we have, and we really rely on our part-time workers, and that's why I put the slide up at the end. You know, we're always looking for good workers that can help us in the warehouse and do all the different jobs, because we just don't have enough hands or time to do it all. But I think we've got adequate staff. And I think the commissioners have been very good to us in funding us. So we have a good relationship with the commissioners, and I want to keep that. I don't want to ask for things that we don't need. But again, we need good part-time workers to help us out.
If you think of each of our staff members as being a team leader, so that when it comes to election time or when their particular task is busy, suddenly they have a team of part-timers that they are leading, then that's a multiplier for us.
Thank you. Another election-related question, then a legal sort of Board of Education elections question. First, how can I change my party affiliation in Stark County? If you're nonpartisan, can I request either party ballot, and does that change my affiliation? I think you've answered that, but we should clarify that.
If you're anybody, partisan or nonpartisan, you can request any type of ballot, and yes, if it's a party ballot, it changes your party affiliation. However, besides doing that, you don't have an option. So if you choose if you choose on Tuesday to be a libertarian, you're going to be a libertarian until the next primary election when you choose a different ballot.
Thank you. With recent voting rights news, what is the process of, or for, changing the Constitution at the state level and federal level? I'm assuming this goes to, with the recent voting right news, I'm thinking this goes to like SAVE Act or the state or federal level. The process is a
In
complicated
the
one.
Constitution,
Yeah.
I can't speak to the state constitution,
Yeah.
but I do know that Ohio has a very unique way of looking at that. You can do it by referendum,
Yeah.
which unfortunately sometimes is ignored by political forces. In terms of the United States Constitution, it's in the Constitution itself. 2/3 of each house has to make a recommendation, and then it goes to the country, and 3/4 of the states have to agree to the amendment, which has happened, oh God, there are 27 amendments now? Something like that. Does that answer the question?
Yes, thank you. I hope. Two kind of dovetail into each other before the big one for the whole panel. First of all, how can the average person keep up with new regulations and requirements? How can the average person keep up with new regulations and requirements?
Well, check our Facebook page, which is a lot more active than it used to be, and call us.
Yeah, definitely call us anytime.
Thank you.
Email us.
Be a poll worker. You'll be in the know about everything.
Oh.
Okay, 330-451-VOTE.
Thanks, that's easy.
Yeah?
Nice. All right. Again, before the big one, this is speculative, of course. Now, the question reads, what is the likelihood of the SAVE Act passing? I'm assuming that refers to the federal one because that's the one much in the news. We also have a state version, but anyone want to tackle that? What is the likelihood of the SAVE Act passing?
I think the House is going to pretty well clear it. Right, and that's what I'm saying. But the Senate, I think the Senate's having trouble. And then if the Senate changes anything, it has to go to reconciliation. So what's the chances? I mean, with this Congress, it's hard to say.
Hard to say. So much is hard to say these days. For all speakers, if you could wave a magic wand, what would you change to make elections even more fair, orderly, and efficient? What would you change if you could wave a magic wand to make elections more fair, orderly, and efficient?
Okay, this is going to sound silly, but I wish we had a much bigger parking lot at our office. Because I don't know how many of you came to vote at our office in November of '24, but I mean, we had a major operation where we hired part-time people just to help people find parking spots because we don't have enough space. So I guess that's my easy answer, which is hard because, you know, you just don't all of a sudden change a parking lot. It takes a lot of planning.
I think I would modify some of the rules about campaign finance.
There's a fairly recent U.S. Supreme Court case that essentially allows very wealthy people to spend as much money as they want to influence elections. I would change that.
I was acting as the Canton Law Director when Citizens United was decided by the U.S. Supreme Court. And I remember a few council persons cornering me and saying, well, what does this mean? And I just shook my head and said, it's bad, in my opinion. And then, of course, we had a special session to elaborate on it.
When you think about the United States Supreme Court, the Constitution can work pretty well. The idea is that the president nominates, but who determines whether the person becomes a justice? Which branch? The Senate. And so the Senate has really great responsibility to ask questions of the person, to delve into their backgrounds, to some degree, ask them what they would do in certain situations. Generally, a candidate for the Supreme Court will not answer a question about a specific case. But you can get around that by asking about their theories. What is your theory of the law? Do you believe that the Constitution should be read as it was written in the 18th century? Or do you believe that it should be read as it applies today? I mean, that doesn't require them to issue an opinion. It requires you to know their theory of the law.
Thank you.
And I'm not running for the Supreme Court.
It's a pretty challenging place to be these days. Before we get to our closing thoughts and information about upcoming events and websites and so on, any points that any of our three panelists would like to add to anything they've said or anything that's been asked?
I would say just please be a poll worker or encourage somebody else to be a poll worker. And if you ever have questions or you're hearing something that's weird, just call us, just email us. We're happy to talk. We would rather dispel rumors up front than to let things linger.
Mr.
I don't think it really matters who's up here. To me, what matters is who's out there. The fact that you're here, what's today? A Tuesday? It's a Tuesday night? You could be home watching a baseball game, but you're here. Why are you here? You're here because you care. You care. It's like this lady's shirt. You care about democracy. And unless we as individuals vote, it ain't going to work. So the fact that I see this audience, how many, 50 people here? Now, I'd like to see a little bit more younger audience as opposed to 100-year-olds, but I'm kidding. I'd like to see some younger people because I think the legacy that we have is going to fall upon them fairly rapidly. And the older people need to get out of the way, and the younger people need to step up, but they need to be in places like this.
Hear, hear.
Nobody wants to disenfranchise the vulnerable voter. So if you know somebody who isn't following things, who is not mobile, who is getting caught up in things and getting confused about things, help them. Help them to get their ID, help them to get to the polls, help them to understand that there are ways that they can get around any of the problems that they are encountering. That can be a very valuable role for you as sophisticated election-caring people to fill.
Thank you. And if I can echo that, you've often heard the phrase, elections matter, or the phrase, elections have consequences. Wherever you stand, we are seeing serious consequences of the last few elections, serious consequences. If you care about your children, your grandchildren, your nieces, your nephews, if you care about the future, and I'm preaching to the choir here, but go out and tell others to research, learn, understand what it is you're voting for and who you're voting for. Please, I can't say that enough on behalf of our organization, which is a segue into our program. Please take it with you. Please consider donating, as it suggests on the back of the cover. We've been here since 1920, and I'm here to show you they even accept men. And it's one of the best organizations I've ever been a member of. So well run, so well done. I can't say enough good things about them. I'm glad they asked me to help out with legal and educational forums. A few more notes before we thank you again. We are so grateful that the speakers donated of their time. Thank you so much again. You have surveys on your chairs. Please fill them out if you can. We want to get better. If you want to sign up to be a member of the League of Women Voters, you are more than welcome. It's a wonderful organization. And moving on, we're going to be trying something new tomorrow night. It's a special research project along the lines of what we were saying earlier, and it involves people who either don't vote at every election or can't seem to. So tomorrow, the League of Women Voters of the Canton area is hosting a small informal conversation about voting in Stark County, and it's being held tomorrow at 5:30 at the Timken downtown campus on Tusk Street in their commons. It is not a presentation. It's just a chance for people to talk about what works, what's confusing, and what might make voting easier. We're especially hoping to include people who don't always vote or have questions about how it works. None of you do, of course, after tonight. If you know someone who might appreciate that kind of a conversation, a friend, a neighbor, a coworker, or a family member, we would love to help you. We would love your help in inviting them. It'll be relaxed, and Peggy DeCarlos, would you mind just standing up for a moment and filling in anything I forgot? You're kind of heading this thing up. We very much appreciate it. Nice and loud.
Well, thank you, everyone, and thank you, Joe. This is, as Joe said, just informal conversation. It's targeting people primarily in two groups. Younger voters, 18 to 29-year-olds, and people who have been in precincts who haven't had high voter turnout. And as you're saying, it's, we don't believe people have gotten out of the habit of voting or maybe haven't voted because they're apathetic. We believe that the process can be confusing, and it sounds like it's even more confusing. And people may feel like their vote doesn't matter. So hopefully tomorrow we'll do more listening and learning, and if we can eliminate some barriers that are there, everyone can leave with a personal voting plan that addresses the questions that you guys have so well explained today. And we have no idea how many people are going to show up. We're behind bringing 4 large pizzas. Who knows if there'll be enough? Again, if you know anyone who would fall into the category of getting out of the habit of voting or having not voted, please encourage them to come.
Thank you, Peggy, for all your work on that issue and your ongoing work. All right, just a couple last notes. Thank you for coming again. You are so appreciated. You don't know how much you're appreciated. You brave the weather, or at least the weather reports. Don't know what's happening now, but it's coming. Something's coming. Happy Easter and Passover weekend to those of you who follow those faiths and traditions. Be safe. Your exits are out the back door and up the stairs or the elevator. Your vote matters. Thank you for coming.